I helped my brother start his business, but he took the profits and left me with nothing. Now he won't answer my calls. It started as an idea, a simple dream that I thought could turn into something big. My brother, Alex, and I had always been close. Growing up, we shared everything from childhood secrets to our wild ambitions. There was a bond between us that was more than just blood, it was a partnership. When Alex came to me one evening, talking about starting his own business, I couldn't help but get excited. It was the kind of opportunity that felt like it could change everything. Alex had always been a dreamer. He had this magnetic energy about him that made you believe anything was possible. He spoke passionately about his vision for a sustainable, eco-friendly clothing brand. It was an idea he had been toying with for months, and after a few drinks one night, he told me he was serious. He wanted to make this business happen, and he needed my help. At first, I was hesitant. Starting a business was risky, and I wasn't sure if Alex was ready to take on that kind of responsibility. But the more he spoke, the more I believed in his vision. I could see his potential, his drive. I knew that with the right resources, he could make it work. I just need some startup capital to get going, and I'll do the rest. I've done the research, and I'm confident this can be successful, he told me. I didn't have much savings of my own, but I had enough to help him get started. The idea of supporting my brother's dream, of seeing him succeed, was more than enough motivation for me to take the risk. He had always been there for me when I needed him, and I knew this was my chance to be there for him. I agreed to loan him $15,000 to get the business off the ground. He assured me that he would pay me back once the business started turning a profit. It all seemed like a fair deal. I trusted him, and I thought this was just the beginning of something big for both of us. The first few months went by in a blur of excitement. We worked together to design the clothing line, market the brand, and build an online presence. I was involved in the financial aspects of the business, helping him track expenses and manage the budget. It felt like a real team effort, and I couldn't have been prouder of the progress we were making. The business was growing, and Alex was on fire. His enthusiasm was infectious, and he was constantly coming up with new ideas to push the brand forward. I saw him change during this time. Alex, the dreamer, had transformed into a leader. He was more driven than I had ever seen him, and I was thrilled to be part of this journey with him. I began to think that, maybe, I had made the right decision. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about supporting my brother and building something meaningful. But then, things started to shift. Slowly at first, then more noticeably. As the business began to generate revenue, Alex's attitude began to change. He became less communicative, less involved in the day-to-day aspects of the business. The hours I spent working alongside him, brainstorming and collaborating started to feel like they were fading into the background. He began taking more and more control, and I found myself becoming more of an outsider. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he was just getting busier as the business grew. Maybe he was just stressed. After all, running a business was no small feat, and I understood that. But then came the day that everything changed. Alex had always been transparent with me about the business finances. We kept track of our expenses and profits together. But one day, I asked him for an update on the profits and when I could expect to see the first payment of my loan. His response was curt, evasive, and left me with a sinking feeling in my stomach. We're reinvesting the profits back into the business. We can't afford to pay anything out yet, he said quickly, brushing me off. I pressed him on the details. How much are we making? When will we be able to pay me back? He shrugged, his response lacking the usual enthusiasm. We're working on scaling. It'll take some time. Don't worry, you'll get paid back. Just not yet. At that moment, I felt a deep sense of unease. His tone was different, more distant, more guarded. But I dismissed it, telling myself that this was just part of the growing pains of starting a business. I trusted him after all. He was my brother. But then, things took a turn for the worse. A week later, when I went to check on the financials again, I noticed something troubling. The numbers didn't add up. There were large, unexplained withdrawals from the business account, payments to vendors that didn't make sense, and some transactions that seemed off. I asked Alex about it, but he became defensive. What are you accusing me of? He snapped. It's just business. You wouldn't understand all the costs involved. His reaction was sharp, uncharacteristically so. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Something was wrong. Something had changed, and I wasn't sure what it was. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that I was being shut out of something that was once so open and collaborative. Days turned into weeks, and the feeling of being kept in the dark grew stronger. Alex became increasingly unresponsive to my calls and messages. The once steady stream of communication about the business slowed to a trickle. I tried to reach out to him multiple times, both professionally and personally, but every time, I was met with silence. He didn't answer my texts, didn't pick up the phone, and when I did manage to get a hold of him, his responses were curt and dismissive. I had to face the reality. I had been cut out of the business. The silence between Alex and me grew louder each passing day. I tried to keep my emotions in check, telling myself that things were just temporary, that the pressures of the business were likely wearing him down. But deep inside, I knew something was wrong. The gap between us was widening, and I couldn't ignore the feeling that I was being shut out. I remember the first time I felt completely helpless in this situation. It was a week after Alex had brushed off my questions about the financials. I had tried calling him several times, asking for a meeting so we could go over the business, talk about my loan repayment, and discuss the future. Each call was either ignored or answered by a brief text message that seemed more like an excuse than an explanation. He told me he was busy, that there were things to sort out, and that he would get back to me. But he never did. The first night, I found myself standing in front of my computer, staring at the business account's transaction history, trying to make sense of what was happening. I had always been involved in every aspect of the business, from brainstorming marketing ideas to setting up the website, and I had kept track of every dollar spent. But now, as I looked through the account, I noticed things that didn't add up. Payments were being made to vendors I didn't recognize. Large amounts were disappearing with no clear explanation, and the profits I had been expecting to see were nowhere to be found. It didn't make sense. How was the business still running, and yet there was no trace of the profits? I decided to confront him again. This time, I sent a text asking him for a face-to-face meeting. It had been long enough, and I needed some answers. He finally agreed, but when the day came, I could tell he wasn't prepared for a serious conversation. His tone was off, like he was already preparing for a fight. We met at the same cafe where we discussed the original idea for the business. I remember walking in and seeing Alex already sitting at a corner table, looking at his phone. When he saw me, he quickly put the phone down and stood up, forcing a smile. But something about it seemed off. There was no excitement in his voice, no warmth in his eyes. The brother I had known all my life, supportive, energetic, and full of plans, was nowhere to be found. "Hey," he said, his tone flat. "What's up? You wanted to talk." I sat down across from him, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to confront him, but I didn't know how he was going to react. I had spent so long making excuses for him, telling myself that he would come around, that he would be responsible. But now I wasn't so sure. I could feel the disappointment bubbling inside me, the anger rising, but I pushed it aside. "Alex," I said, keeping my voice calm, though I could feel the tension building. "I've been trying to reach you. I've been looking at the business accounts, and there are some things that don't add up. I've asked you several times about the profits, about the repayment, and every time you've avoided the conversation. What's going on?" He shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable. "It's just business stuff, you know? There are a lot of moving parts, and it's taking longer to get things organized. I'm working on it." I could feel my patience wearing thin. I had helped him build this business. I had trusted him, and now, here he was, dismissing my concerns as if they didn't matter. "Alex," I said, trying to remain composed, "I'm not asking you to work on it. I'm asking you to explain to me what's happening with the money. Where's the profit? And why haven't I seen a single cent of my repayment?" He looked away, avoiding my gaze. That was the moment I knew something wasn't right. I had seen him look me in the eye 1,000 times before, but now, he couldn't even do that. "I told you," he said, his voice defensive, "we're reinvesting everything. I've been putting the profits back into the business, into the growth. I can't pay you back until we're further along." "Reinvesting," I repeated, my voice rising despite my best efforts to remain calm. "That's what you've been telling me for months, but the numbers don't add up. There's money disappearing, Alex, and I'm left here with nothing." His face hardened, and for the first time, I saw a flash of irritation in his eyes. "You don't get it. This is how business works. You don't just make money overnight. It's a process. I'm doing what's best for the business, and for both of us." It hit me then, the weight of what he was saying, and the reality that I had been ignored, used, and manipulated. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about my trust being shattered and the realization that Alex was no longer the person I thought he was. The brother I had once known had become someone else entirely. Someone who was willing to take advantage of my generosity without a second thought. "You're taking advantage of me," I said quietly, my voice breaking. "You promised you would pay me back. You promised that once the business was profitable, I would get repaid. But here we are, and I've been nothing but patient. I've trusted you, Alex, and now I'm left with nothing." There was a long pause as we sat there, the weight of my words hanging between us. Alex didn't say anything for a few moments, and I could tell he was trying to formulate a response. But instead of an apology or any kind of explanation, he gave me the same line he'd been repeating for months. "I told you, I'm working on it. You'll get paid back when the time's right." That was it. That was the moment I realized this was more than just a business disagreement. This was about respect. This was about him taking advantage of my trust, knowing that I wouldn't question him too much because we were family. But that had changed. I wasn't going to be his safety net anymore. I wasn't going to keep letting him use me for his own benefit. I stood up abruptly, the anger I had been holding back finally spilling over. "I don't want to hear that again, Alex. I've had enough of your excuses. I'm done. You've made it clear where your priorities are, and it's not with me. Don't bother calling me again until you're ready to make things right." Before he could say anything, I turned and walked out of the cafe. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The truth was too clear now. Alex wasn't the person I thought he was. He wasn't the brother who had dreams and ambition. He was someone who had taken advantage of me, of my trust, and now I had nothing left to give. I walked out into the cold, the weight of the conversation settling in my chest. My brother had taken everything from me, not just my money, but my trust, my belief in him, and the hope that one day we would work together to build something meaningful. As I walked away, I realized something. I had lost my brother, but I was no longer willing to lose myself. I couldn't keep giving to someone who wasn't willing to give anything back. The days following my confrontation with Alex felt like a whirlwind. After I had walked out of that cafe, feeling both defeated and determined, I tried to process everything. I tried to talk myself into thinking it was just a misunderstanding, that I had misread the situation, that maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. The betrayal was real, and the distance between us had grown too wide to ignore anymore. Alex and I had always been close, more than just siblings. We were supposed to be partners, even if we had never officially said so. I had helped him in countless ways, emotionally, financially, and physically. The idea of starting a business together had excited me, and I had imagined all the ways our relationship would grow and prosper along with the business. But instead, I felt like I had been used. I had been there for him in ways no one else would be, and yet, he had taken advantage of that. He had exploited my trust, my hard-earned savings, and my loyalty without a second thought. I tried calling him the next few days, hoping that maybe he would come to his senses, that he would realize what a huge mistake he had made, and that he would take accountability for his actions. But each time, I was met with silence. I left voicemail after voicemail, trying to get through to him. I explained that I was willing to discuss everything, that I just wanted to understand what had happened, but nothing, not a single word from him, not even a simple acknowledgement. It felt like I was being ghosted by someone I had once considered a partner. The frustration, the anger, the confusion, it all started to take a toll on me. I couldn't focus on anything else. Every time I tried to go back to my normal routine, the thoughts of the business, of Alex, and the injustice of it all crept back into my mind. It wasn't just about the money anymore. Sure, the $15,000 I had given him was a significant sum, but what really stung was the way he had cut me out of everything. The way he treated me like a stepping stone, someone to use when he needed help and then cast aside when it was convenient for him. He had taken the profit from the business, and now he was taking the relationship I thought we had. One evening, I sat down with a glass of wine and finally allowed myself to break down. I had been so strong in front of everyone else, my friends, my family, but now, when I was alone with my thoughts, the weight of it all hit me. I had given him my trust. I had given him the benefit of the doubt, and now I was left with nothing but a shattered version of what had once been a close relationship. I took out my phone and looked at the last message Alex had sent me. It was from days ago, before the cafe confrontation. He had apologized, but the apology felt hollow. like he was trying to placate me without actually owning up to what he had done. It wasn't the apology I needed. It wasn't the kind of apology that showed remorse or responsibility. It was the kind that came when someone was cornered and realized they had no other option but to say something. His last words to me had been, "I'll pay you back when I can, don't worry about it." But I did worry. I worried because I could see it now. Alex wasn't planning on paying me back. He wasn't planning on taking responsibility for what he had done. He was too wrapped up in his own ambition and his own vision to care about the people who had supported him. And as much as I hated to admit it, I was no longer part of that equation. I set my phone down on the table and stared at it for a long time. I had to accept the truth. Alex had betrayed me, and I couldn't just keep hoping for a different outcome. I couldn't keep allowing myself to be strung along, waiting for him to get it together. He was never going to change, not unless he wanted to. And if he didn't, I had to accept that it was time to let go, not just of the business, but of the brother I thought I knew. The following days were filled with an overwhelming sense of helplessness and anger. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been taken for granted for years. Alex had always been the one to get the spotlight in our family. He was the charming one, the dreamer, the one who everyone believed would do something great. Meanwhile, I had always been the steady one, the responsible one who kept everything together. I had sacrificed so much of myself for him, and now I was left with nothing. No explanation, no closure, no apology that meant anything. I began to lose my sense of self in all of this. I was no longer the person who had helped build the business. I was the person who had been cast aside. I didn't know how to rebuild my own sense of trust in people. If I couldn't trust my brother, then who could I trust? The questions kept swirling in my head, and the more I thought about it, the more I felt like my entire world had been upended. I knew I had to make some changes. For the sake of my own well-being, I couldn't keep waiting around for Alex to make things right. I had to stop being a part of his toxic narrative. The first step was letting go of the business. I didn't want to be involved anymore. I didn't want to chase him for the money I was owed. I didn't want to keep playing this game where I was the one who was always doing the right thing, only to be left holding the bag. I made a decision to reach out to a lawyer just to understand my options. I had no intention of going to court right away, but I needed to know what my rights were. I needed to know if there was any way I could get my money back or if I was just out of luck. The lawyer explained to me that it would be a long, complicated process and that there was no guarantee I would get anything back. But it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about holding Alex accountable for his actions. It was about making sure he knew that I wouldn't let him get away with this. I started gathering all the paperwork I had, proof of the loan, the bank transfers, the contracts we had signed, and everything else that could support my case. As I went through the documents, I realized how naive I had been to trust him so completely. I had believed in his promises, his dreams, and his ideas, but I had never questioned whether he was ready to follow through. And now, I was left trying to pick up the pieces of my broken trust. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a message from him, but there was nothing. Days turned into weeks, and he remained silent. Every time I saw his name on my phone screen, I felt a mix of hope and dread, wondering if this would be the moment when he would finally reach out and take responsibility. But it never came. The silence was deafening, and I realized with crushing clarity that I might never hear from him again. I had always prided myself on being a patient person. I'd been the one in our family who kept things together, who helped everyone else pick up the pieces when things went wrong. I'd always been there for Alex, whether it was helping him with school, picking him up when he failed, or supporting him in his various business ventures. That's what family does, right? But now, I was beginning to question everything. The betrayal wasn't just about the money anymore. Yes, I had helped Alex get started in his business. I had believed in him, and I had trusted him to be responsible with the money I gave him. But the deeper wound was the way he had completely ignored me. The way he had acted as if I didn't matter anymore. The way he treated me like a tool, useful for a moment, and then discarded once he had gotten what he wanted. It wasn't the first time I had been let down by a family member, but it was the first time it felt so cold, so intentional. Alex didn't just avoid my calls. He didn't just ignore my messages. He didn't respond to any of my attempts to reach out. He was actively keeping me out of the loop, and I didn't know how to handle it. For the first time in a long time, I didn't know what to do. I had always been the one who could fix things. But this was different. Days turned into weeks, and every time I thought about calling Alex again, I found myself hesitating. What would I say? What would it change? I had already confronted him, and his responses had been nothing but excuses. I had asked for accountability, but all I got was silence. It was like I was begging for him to wake up and realize what he was doing, but he never did. And the worst part? He didn't even seem to care. I spent countless nights staring at my phone, wondering if this would be the day he would finally reach out. But the messages never came. The phone never rang. I was left in limbo, not knowing if this was a phase he was going through or if it was permanent. My patience began to wear thin. I talked to friends about what was happening. Some of them were supportive. Others seemed uncomfortable, not knowing how to navigate the delicate line between offering support and avoiding conflict. Everyone had an opinion, but no one had the answers I needed. Some said I should just wait it out. Give him time, they suggested. He'll come around. But I had already waited long enough. I had waited for months while he made excuses. I had waited for years while he made the same mistakes. I didn't have time to wait anymore. Other friends told me to cut ties completely, to stop enabling him and let him face the consequences of his actions. He'll learn, they said. He'll figure it out eventually. But that thought left a bitter taste in my mouth. Cutting him off felt like the last resort, and I wasn't ready to make that choice just yet. I wanted to believe that things could get better, that he could come to his senses. But with every passing day, I was beginning to lose hope. I sat down one evening, after another long day of trying to distract myself from the situation, and began to sift through the legal options I had. I knew I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't let him walk away from the business with no consequences. I was owed money, and I had a right to fight for it. But even more than that, I had a right to be treated with respect. I had a right to expect honesty and integrity from my own brother. I contacted a lawyer, someone I had worked with in the past, and asked for advice. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to achieve. Perhaps I wanted to understand my options, or perhaps I wanted to prepare myself for the reality that I might have to take legal action to get my money back. It wasn't an easy conversation. The lawyer was sympathetic, but practical. She explained that there were no guarantees, that the legal process could be long, expensive, and emotionally draining. But at least I would have a clear path forward. She advised me to gather all the evidence I had. The loan agreement, any text messages or emails we had exchanged regarding the business, the transaction records, and any other paperwork that could show the extent of my financial involvement. It wasn't much, just a few pages of documents, some casual emails, but it was enough to build a case. I spent the next week gathering everything I could. As I pieced the story together, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anger rising within me. Alex had taken advantage of my trust in ways I had never imagined. He had promised me that he would repay me, that he would work with me as an equal partner in the business. And yet, he had taken my investment, used it for his own benefit, and left me with nothing. The betrayal felt so deep, so personal. But what hurt the most wasn't the money. It wasn't the business. It was the realization that Alex didn't care about me the way I had cared about him. He hadn't just stolen from me. He had stolen my sense of security, my belief in family, and my trust. He had shown me that, when it came down to it, I was just another person in his life that he could use when it suited him and discard when it didn't. The worst part was the silence. The fact that he wouldn't even answer my calls. Every attempt I made to reach out felt like a slap in the face. I had spent years standing by him, defending him when others questioned his choices, helping him when he needed it. And now, when I needed him to step up, when I needed him to be honest with me, he was nowhere to be found. It was at that moment that I knew. I couldn't let this go any longer. I couldn't keep waiting for a brother who was no longer the person I had once known. I had to take control of my life again. I had to stand up for myself and stop waiting for him to change. It was time to let go, even if it meant severing the one relationship I had always taken for granted. But before I could make that final decision, Alex reached out. The message came on a Tuesday afternoon. "Hey, I've been thinking a lot about everything. I know I've messed up, and I owe you an apology. I'm sorry for everything. Can we talk?" My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected this. For months, he had ignored me, avoided me, and dismissed my concerns. And now, out of nowhere, he was asking to talk. I stared at the message for a long time, my mind racing with questions. What had changed? What did he want from me? Was this real, or just another way to placate me? I took a deep breath and started typing. "I'm glad you're ready to talk, but I need to be honest with you, Alex. I don't know if I can keep doing this. I've given you everything, and you've ignored me. You've lied to me, and I can't just forget that. I hesitated before hitting send. I wasn't sure if this was the right time to have this conversation. I wasn't sure if I was ready for the emotional fallout. But I knew one thing. I couldn't go on pretending that everything was fine. I stared at the message I had just sent to Alex for a long moment. My fingers hovered over my phone, almost as if I expected him to reply immediately, but I knew that wouldn't happen. The last time we had spoken, it had ended in silence. I had hoped for an explanation, some sign of remorse, but all I got was an endless string of excuses and no willingness to take responsibility for his actions. Yet, despite everything, I was still holding out hope that this time would be different. My phone buzzed. Alex had responded. I opened his message cautiously, bracing myself for whatever was coming. His tone was different this time. Less defensive, less dismissive. Maybe it was the reality of everything he'd done finally sinking in, or maybe he had realized that the silence between us wasn't something that could last forever. His message was short, but it hit me with a mix of emotions that I didn't know how to process. I get it. I know I've messed up. You're right. I haven't been honest with you. I don't know how to make it right, but I need to talk. Can we meet? I owe you that much. I felt a pang in my chest. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that Alex was finally owning up to what he had done. But after everything, I wasn't sure if I could trust him anymore. My first instinct was to ignore his message, to block him out completely and move on. But then I remembered what had brought me to this point. What had I been fighting for all along? Was I really ready to let him go without giving him one last chance to explain himself? Or, if nothing else, at least one final opportunity to make amends? I didn't have an immediate answer, but I knew I couldn't avoid this conversation forever. I had to meet him, if only to get the closure I so desperately needed. So I agreed. We met at a park, a place where we had spent a lot of time as kids. I thought the setting might make it easier, more neutral ground, a place where we could talk like we used to. But when I saw him sitting on the bench, looking smaller than I remembered, the years between us felt painfully obvious. He looked worn out, as if the weight of everything he had done was starting to catch up with him. His eyes were tired, and for a moment, I wasn't sure who he was anymore. I took a seat beside him, trying to keep my emotions in check. The moment felt fragile, like it could break at any time, but I knew this conversation was the most important one I would ever have with him. Alex, I said, my voice steady, though I could feel the anger just beneath the surface. This isn't easy for me. You've hurt me more than I can explain. I've tried to give you the benefit of the doubt, but every time, you've let me down. You've made promises you didn't keep, and now I'm sitting here wondering if this is even worth it anymore. He was quiet for a long moment. His eyes were downcast, like he was gathering the courage to say something meaningful. I'm sorry, he said finally. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I know I've screwed up. I know that I've taken advantage of your trust, of everything you've done for me. I can't undo the damage I've caused, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. I've been selfish, and I've been stupid. I don't have an excuse for what I did, but I'll try to explain. I crossed my arms over my chest, nodding but not saying anything. I was waiting for him to really explain, waiting for him to show some real remorse. So far, it felt like the same apology I had heard 100 times before, half-hearted, defensive, and lacking in accountability. I needed more than that. I've been caught up in the idea of the business, he continued. I was so focused on making it work, on making money, that I didn't even think about the people I was hurting. I thought I could do everything on my own. I thought I could keep you out of it and just handle things myself. But I was wrong, and I know now that I've made a huge mistake. There was a flicker of sincerity in his voice, but it didn't erase the months of frustration and pain that had built up inside me. I needed to hear more. I needed to hear that he understood the depth of what he had done. It wasn't just the business. It was the way he had treated me like I didn't matter. The way he had left me in the dark, not caring that I had been the one to put him in the position to succeed. Why did you ignore me? I asked, my voice rising. Why didn't you talk to me? Why did you take the money and then act like I didn't exist? Why didn't you just tell me what was going on? I didn't even get a chance to fight for what was mine. You just disappeared. He looked up at me, his eyes searching mine, and for the first time in months, I saw a hint of regret there. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. I thought I was protecting you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought if I kept the business running on my own, you wouldn't have to deal with the stress. I thought you'd be better off if I just took control. But I was wrong. I should have included you. I should have kept you in the loop. I felt a surge of anger flood my chest. You don't get it, I said, my voice trembling now. It's not about you trying to protect me. It's about respect. You promised me you would pay me back. You promised me that this was a partnership. And when things started to go well, you just cut me out like I never mattered. Alex winced, as if my words hit harder than he had expected. He opened his mouth to speak, but paused, seemingly unsure of what to say next. After a long silence, he sighed and ran his hand through his hair, clearly defeated. I know. I messed up. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to make it right. I'm not asking you to forget what I did, but I want to show you that I'm serious about fixing things. I want to work with you to make things right. If you'll let me. The words hum in the air between us, heavy with the weight of the past few months. For a long time, I said nothing. I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive him, if I was ready to reopen that door. The hurt was still so fresh, so raw, and the trust that had been broken was something that couldn't be easily repaired. Finally, I spoke, my voice soft but resolute. I don't know if I can trust you again, Alex. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to believe in you the way I used to. But I'll listen. I'll listen to what you have to say, and I'll think about it. But right now, I'm not sure where to go from here. Alex nodded, his face full of regret. That's all I can ask for. I don't want to lose you, and I don't want to lose everything we built together. I'll do whatever it takes. As I stood up to leave, I couldn't help but feel a small flicker of hope inside me. Maybe Alex could change. Maybe he could redeem himself, but only time would tell. The road to rebuilding our relationship wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But at least for the first time in months, I felt like there was a possibility, no matter how small, that we could find a way forward. I walked away from that conversation with more questions than answers. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to let him off the hook easily. He had to prove that he was worthy of my trust again, and that would take time. The days that followed our conversation at the park were a mix of uncertainty and tentative hope. Alex had said the right things, but I wasn't ready to trust him again. I couldn't just forget what he had done, and I couldn't go back to the way things were before. There were too many cracks in the foundation of our relationship, too many broken promises, too much damage that couldn't simply be erased with a few heartfelt words. I had been down this road before, and each time, it had led me right back to the same place, disappointment. But there was something different this time. For the first time in a long while, Alex was taking responsibility for his actions. He wasn't brushing me off or making excuses. He wasn't trying to deflect blame. He was acknowledging what he had done, and that was a step in the right direction. However, acknowledging the problem was just the beginning. The real test would be whether he could prove that he was truly committed to making things right. I spent the next few weeks in a state of limbo. I wanted to believe in him again. I wanted to trust that he would do what he said, that he would follow through on his promises. But every time I thought about it, I felt the weight of everything that had happened. I couldn't erase the feeling that I had been used, that the person I had trusted the most had taken advantage of my good intentions. Alex reached out to me several times during this period. He would text me, call me, even send me messages on social media. Each time, I would hesitate before responding. I had been burned before, and the last thing I wanted was to fall back into the same cycle of disappointment. But part of me still wanted to believe that there was a chance for us to repair our relationship, even if it meant starting from scratch. When I finally agreed to meet him again, it was at my request. I needed to see if his actions matched his words. I needed to understand if he was truly committed to fixing things, or if he was just saying what he thought I wanted to hear. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near my apartment, a neutral place where we could talk without distractions. When Alex arrived, I noticed something different about him. There was a sincerity in his eyes, a vulnerability that I hadn't seen before. He wasn't the same confident, self-assured person I had known. He seemed human in a way I hadn't expected. He sat down across from me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy, filled with the weight of everything that had happened. "I've been thinking a lot," Alex said finally, breaking the silence. "I know I've hurt you, and I know I've messed up more times than I can count. But I want you to know that I'm working on it. I've been going to therapy, trying to figure out why I've been so reckless. I've realized that I've been selfish, and I don't want to keep making the same mistakes." I listened quietly, not sure what to say. Therapy was a step in the right direction, but it wasn't a cure-all. It wasn't going to fix the years of damage in one session. Still, I could hear the honesty in his voice, the recognition of his own flaws. And for the first time, I felt like maybe there was a chance for him to change. I appreciate that you're taking responsibility for your actions, I said after a pause. But it's not just about words, Alex. It's about showing up. It's about proving that you can be trustworthy again. And that's not going to happen overnight. He nodded, looking down at his hands. I get it. And I don't expect things to go back to normal right away. I know I've burned a lot of bridges. But I want to make it right. And I want to start by paying you back. It won't happen all at once, but I'm going to work on it. I promise. The promise was significant. It wasn't just about the money, though that was a part of it. It was about showing that he was serious, that he understood the weight of his actions. But even with his promise, I knew I couldn't just blindly trust him again. I had to protect myself. Alex, I want to believe you, I said softly. But I can't just take your word for it. I've been burned too many times. I need to see you follow through. I need to see you take the necessary steps to make this right, not just with me, but with yourself. You've hurt me, and you've hurt this family, and I can't just forget that. It's going to take time. He looked at me, his face filled with regret and understanding. I know, and I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I just want to prove to you that I can change. I know I've let you down, but I'm not the same person I was when I made those mistakes. There was something in his voice that made me think maybe he wasn't lying. Maybe he had truly begun to change. But I wasn't going to make the mistake of putting all my faith in him just yet. I had to let him show me, over time, that he could be the person he was promising to be. I'm not asking for perfection, I said, my voice firm but soft. I'm asking for honesty. I'm asking for transparency. I'm asking for you to show me that you're not just doing this because you think it's what I want to hear. You have to show me that you're truly committed to changing. I will, he said quietly, his voice steady. I'll show you. I'll do whatever it takes. After that conversation, I left the coffee shop feeling a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. It wasn't the end of the story, not by a long shot, but it was a start, a small, hesitant step forward. We both had a long road ahead of us, but for the first time in months, I felt like there was hope. Over the next few weeks, Alex kept his word. He paid back a small portion of the money he owed me, though he wasn't yet able to cover everything. He started to open up more about what had been going on with the business and the mistakes he had made. He was honest with me about the struggles he was facing and the lessons he was learning in therapy. It wasn't easy for him, and it wasn't easy for me either. But slowly, over time, I began to see a glimmer of the person I had once known. The process of rebuilding trust was slow. There were days when I still felt like I was waiting for him to mess up again. But there were also days when I felt a sense of relief. I could see that he was trying, that he was taking responsibility for his actions. And while I didn't know what the future held for us, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't continue to let his mistakes define me. I had to let go of the anger and disappointment I had been carrying for so long. In the end, it wasn't about the money or the business. It was about whether or not we could rebuild what we had lost, whether we could find a way back to each other, not as business partners, but as family. I didn't know if that was possible, but I was willing to try. For the first time in a long time, I felt like there was hope, not just for the business, but for my relationship with Alex. But I knew it was up to him to prove that he deserved the second chance I was offering.